Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to do a quick live tonight. I'm pretty tired, it's been a long day, but I promised yesterday we'd go and talk a little about row covers and wire hoops and all that entails. And, it's always one of those things with row cover, you have a love-hate relationship with them. For winter growing and for season extension, it's an incredible tool, but then again also it can be an incredible disaster too if the wind picks up a row cover, or a windy night they can all blow off. If you ever have had one of those mini tornadoes show up and take a row cover away, we've seen the row cover just lift off and end up half mile to a mile away. One time we had a pretty big piece end up in the power lines, which wasn't great, and the power guys came over and took it down and cut it up, but it was definitely not a great thing that happened. But let's get into it. So I didn't actually write the whole question down, but one of them was, when do I use row cover hoops? And then the other one was, how do I prevent row cover from touching crops and burning the crops? So they can burn it in several different ways. Obviously, when it's super cold and the row cover freezes to a leaf, it can burn. So the first thing would be, if it's in the winter time in your tunnel, try to manage your tunnel temperatures and your tunnel humidity level so that it's very, very low humidity, so there's no water or frost landing on the row cover, and that way you can actually get rid of your hoops completely, and that way your hoops can stay as close to the ground as possible. So if you manage it that way, super dry, humidity is what causes that freezing to occur. So in the field, though, one of the worst things that can happen is you have a warm day, rainstorm, then a cold night, and that wet row cover then just is really already heavy and bowing in, and then it freezes to everything. So that can be a disaster. One of the things to think about is to get bigger hoops and put those hoops closer together so that the row cover is a little bit further up. And if you go to like Rainflow or Nolts, they can actually get you custom hoops, and so we just had some custom ones built so they're longer. And for summer, we're using like the high tensile wire that's like a 9 gauge, so really heavy duty wire. We're not using the stuff that comes on a roll and is really rusty or thin. You really want to spend the money and get high quality hoops. It's not worth it otherwise. In the wintertime, if you're trying to do like low tunnels, you want to go with like a 1/2-inch conduit and pre-bend that. So, but let's jump back to burning as well. So try to get it away, and then also try to reduce the humidity, and depending on the crop too. So let's talk about different kind of crops and what crops we use the row hoops on. So obviously for a lot of our greens, we'll use hoops. For things like brassicas, we'll definitely use hoops because that growing tip needs a place to go. So if the leaves are spread out, sometimes those leaves just can't get the growing tip will break off on some of the crops. So we generally will go with hoops, except for like if we're just trying to protect like spinach or Swiss chard for just a couple weeks, we'll probably actually use no hoops because the leaves that are forming during that time are going to be too small to harvest, so we don't care if they get burned a little bit. But on some of the bigger stuff, we're definitely going to be using hoops. And then also burning too. So like we'll do overwintered spinach and stuff, and especially in early spring with all that wind, that row cover will just chafe, and they'll go back and forth and burn the spinach, even though it didn't get too cold and didn't freeze to it, but it still burned because it was just chafing on that and just getting too close to that. So let's see what else. So we got rubbing, burning, bigger hoops, we talked about that, and there's one more thing on my list to get to, and then just the conduit. So that was kind of all I had on hoops, was just bigger hoops. Think about what crops you need them on. Oh, the big thing for us was the row cover thickness and width. So for us, we would always try to have as wide of pieces as we can manage, and as thick as we could too, because we'd rather take one row cover on in the field especially than having 2 or 3 layers out there. So we would try to go with the Ag 30 in the field and in the high tunnel as well. Then just use multiple layers of that in the high tunnel for frost protection. But like the Ag 19, that was just so thin that it just tended to rip on us very frequently, and it just wasn't worth it. We would use the Ag 12, so the super thin stuff, for summer lettuce or greens production. So like in the case, in place of like an insect netting. So you use the Ag 12 as a really thin insect netting for that. And just bury the edges on that and then just use it once and then get rid of it. So, but otherwise we were probably using sheets about 30 feet wide, trying to cover 4 to 5 beds at a time. And that just limits the amount of row cover rocks or sandbags you're having to use. And, when you're thinking about row covers too, is how you're going to hold that down too. When we started off, we were using these little stupid pins and then even these bigger plastic pins. But we just went to using row cover bags, and we still used a few rocks. A lot of our fields had a lot of rocks in them, so it was just easy to grab rocks and put them along the edge. But eventually we moved to building specialized pallets with sides on them, short 2-foot sides. And then we would put sandbags in there, and we have a preset amount of sandbags per pallet so that they would cover a certain, a 300-foot field, one section. So that way when we went out to row cover a section, we could just grab one pallet and take that out with us. The other thing to think about when you're filling your bags with pea gravel is the best, because if you fill it smaller than pea gravel, it tends to freeze together in the fall and spring, and then is not as effective. Pea gravel just tends to drain the water better and tends to still be flexible when it's frozen. The other thing we would do is we would change the color of the bag every single year, and eventually those bags break down from UV after 3 or 4 years, and so that way we could tell, all right, so yellows are all 4 years old, so go ahead and retire those. So that would just allow us to switch those out rather easily. So, all right, I think that's all. I'm tired. I'm headed upstairs to head to bed. But have a great weekend. I'll be back tomorrow night. Not sure what the question will be. I've got a bunch here I could consider. Some of them require a little research, so I may have, if I have some time tomorrow, we may get into those. Or I might just surf the interweb and then try to find something else. If you have a burning question, feel free to tag me in one of the groups, and we'll get it answered. All right, have a